As you know, we've been going through 1 Peter, the book of 1 Peter. We're now in chapter 4. 1 Peter chapter 4. At the end of chapter 3, he really began to mention how Jesus, who was innocent, suffered for the guilty. The just for the unjust. That's going to be real important to think about that whenever he makes the point that he begins in chapter 4, verse 1. He says, "For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lusts, excess of wine, revellings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries, wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you, who shall give an account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit." So, let's try to break this down a little bit. And when he says, "for as much then," so that goes back to what he was saying about how Jesus died. He was innocent, yet he suffered. Sometimes people have a hard time with this idea of innocent people suffering. Sometimes Christians struggle with the idea of innocent people suffering. Why does this happen? But it is a foundation of the gospel. Think about this for a moment. There was no other person who was as innocent as our Lord, and he suffered. And that is the foundation of our belief that an innocent man, who was also God, suffered for you and I. If he suffered, then we could suffer even if we're innocent. Honestly, that's the only way that we could suffer and it be an honorable thing. And he says that, if you suffer because you did wrong, there's no glory in that. If you break the law and you get put in jail, there's no honor. You broke the law. You committed a crime. You're in jail. You're suffering because you did this to yourself. If you do the right thing and someone mistreats you, you're being like Jesus. You get the chance to honor God now. You get the chance to show that you are what you claim to be. You are a follower of Jesus. And you need to understand, people of the world have always hated people who are innocent. Does it make sense? No, it doesn't. To me, it doesn't make sense why somebody would hate someone who never harmed them. But they do. And righteous people have always been mistreated. And when he says, arm yourselves with the same mind, I've got to prepare my mind to be okay with the idea of me suffering unjustly. You, as a follower of Christ, need to prepare your mind. That arming yourselves with the same mindset, I think, is very important as you think about that. Arm yourself. Embrace the idea in your mind that if you live the way you're supposed to live, everyone's not going to like you. It's just the way it is. You would think they ought to. I mean, you're kind to them. You're blessing them. You're doing good to them. You're not saying anything evil about them. You're not slandering them. You're not hurting them. You'd actually give to them. You pray for them. Why would they hate you? I'll tell you why. Because they don't like people who are not like them. That's it. Later when he'll say, they're going to think it's strange that you don't run with them to the same things they do. Like attracts like. People like people who are like them. Some people don't like people who don't like them. If you decide you're not going to do what other people do, you don't even have to be belligerent about it. You don't need to be hateful about it. Hopefully you never would. But here's the way it'll go. Someone else is telling a dirty joke, and you decide, I'm not going to participate in that. You don't even have to preach to them. You just simply don't participate. Watch the reaction. Now, either they've got the opportunity now to feel guilty or start attacking you or accusing you of something, even though you never said anything. There are times where you don't have to say a word. You just don't do what they're doing, and some people will hate you or think it's strange or be surprised that you're not doing what they do. Okay, after work, one of your co-workers may say, hey, you want to join us for a few drinks? And you simply say, no thanks. You simply don't go. And they start calling you a goody two-shoes, or they start saying whatever they're going to say. Accept that. Like that old song, you don't drink, you don't smoke, what do? You goody two-shoes. Sometimes people hate when other people don't participate in the things they do because it makes them feel guilty. You may not be trying to make them feel guilty. You're just deciding in yourself, I don't want to do that. And people think you're strange because you're not participating. I can almost guarantee you that if you don't participate in the world's activities, there will be, maybe some people will be okay with that. I'm not saying they all will hate you for that. Some people might inwardly respect you because you're not doing it, and they might know that they ought to be doing the same thing you're doing, but they may not be ready to make that choice yet themselves. But there are some people who will not be able to stand you. And it's going to happen. Arm yourselves with this mindset. I think about that phrase, arm yourselves. It's very much like in the beginning of the letter in chapter 1 in verse 13. He said, gird up the loins of your mind. Okay, and some of your translations may say, get your minds ready for action. That literal term, gird up the loins, is a first century expression. It was the idea where they would wear a robe in the first century. When they're ready to work in the garden or in the field or something, they would gird up, pull the bottom of their robe up, tuck it into their girdle or their belt, so they could move a little bit more freely, so they could get ready to move and be active. He's using that terminology or phraseology to say, get your mind for that. Get your mind ready to act. Preparing your mind. That's the same idea here. Arm yourselves. It's like a military term. What are you going to do if you were going into a physical battle? You just march out there? Or do you need training? Do you need gear? You need to know how to use the gear. You need to know what supplies you have. You need to know what happens in this scenario or that scenario. What do you do this or that? And so there's all kinds of things that they need to do to prepare. And, well, there's a spiritual war that a Christian is going to face that you need to prepare your mindset. I've been thinking about this and what this means. I think it's similar to the idea in chapter 3 in verse 15 when he says, be ready always to give an answer. If someone asks you a reason of the hope that is in you. Well, try to think ahead. What if someone asked me, why do you believe in God? Do I have a readiness in me to tell them why I believe in God? Why I believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Why I believe He came to this earth, was born of a virgin. He experienced all the temptations you and I did, but yet He did not sin. And He was crucified, but He rose again on the third day. And He did all that to wash away my sins. Am I prepared to tell someone why I believe that? I do not believe that it was just something made up in a book. There were so many witnesses. The Scriptures foretold of it centuries before it happened. Too many details in Scripture that were told about it that came true exactly like it was said. It had to be Him. It had to be who He had to be who He claimed to be. There were people who felt His wounds after He arose from the grave. The enemies wanted Him dead. I know, I believe, and have many reasons why I believe that Jesus is the Lord and why I believe that He's coming back. But am I ready to tell someone? Suppose someone who is a blasphemer or someone who, let's say, is very anti-religion. Ask me. Now, there's a little bit of a extra scenario or pressure now. Say somebody that's very antagonistic towards what I believe were to ask me why I believe what I believe. Am I now ready to share with them? So I'm getting my mind ready for these kind of things. I think the same thing is being mentioned here in 1 Peter 4. Arm yourselves with the same mindset that I am ready to abstain from the things that I once did or partook in. Also that I am ready to suffer if necessary. I think this is the same idea of Daniel. In Daniel 1 and verse 8, remember Daniel was captured as a young boy. He was assimilated into the Babylonian culture. He was given a new name. He was now told to perform certain tasks to a king that would kill you if you did not do what the king asked you to do. But what did Daniel do in Daniel 1 verse 8? He purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's dainties. The king, no doubt, ate things that were unclean under that covenant. But also they committed idolatrous practices with these with the food that was laid before them. Daniel just didn't want to participate in that. So he determined, I'm not going to eat the way the king eats. Even if this food looks really good and luxurious, even if everybody else around me is doing it, even if it's expected of me, even if they kill me, I'm still not going to participate. What did Daniel do? He made up his mind. I think that's the idea of 1 Peter 4. Arm yourselves with the same mind. Prepare your mind that there's just some things you are not going to do any longer. Suppose someone wants to share an image on their device to your device or share it with you, and you know it's inappropriate. Maybe it's nudity. Maybe it's something else that is sinful, but what you should determine is, I'm not going to participate in that. I am not going to look at that. Will the friend look at you like you're weird if you don't? Maybe. That's kind of what he says in verse 4. That if you don't participate in what they're doing, they're going to look at you like you're strange. Prepare your mind for these kinds of situations. And then see yourself abstaining. Visualize yourself abstaining when someone tempts you to do something you shouldn't do. I think that's part of arming yourselves with the same mindset. Being prepared to abstain. Now, suppose you have a problem with this. Well, here's what I would say. You got two things here if you struggle with actually any sin. Number one, you got to decide, I ain't doing this anymore. I'm not living like this any longer. I like the way he says it in verse 2, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. First, make up your mind, that's not me anymore. Stop thinking of yourself as the guy that looks at women like sex objects. Start looking at people as souls, and stop seeing people the way that you once did. Live no longer the way you once did. You're not an animal. Don't live like an animal any longer. You are bought with a price. You are made in God's image, and He wants you to live in an honorable way toward Him. So, arm yourself with this mindset. That's not me anymore. That was the old me. I don't do that. What if it's some of the other sins that he names? Verse 3. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles. Notice how he says the time past. I think this is a very powerful point if we can. It will help us overcome the things that we once did. Name the sin and then say, okay, I don't do that anymore. Okay? I don't look at things I shouldn't look at anymore. I don't talk that way anymore. If it's lying, if it's gossip, if it's vulgar language, that was the old me. I don't talk like that now. Now I speak truth. Now I speak things that honor God. If I don't have something nice to say about someone, just don't say it. The time past of our life. We've done enough of that, have we not? I think about that. Have we not wasted enough of our time doing things that have dishonored God enough? I need to decide, enough is enough. I have to live for Him now. Because of what He's done for me, I want to arm myself with the same mindset He had when He went into the garden. When He went into that garden and He was in anguish and He was thinking and dreading what He was about to endure, and He prayed and He asked His disciples, watch and pray. What was He asking them when He was about to go to the cross? What was He asking? Watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. Guard your mind. Arm yourselves with that mindset. What do you think Jesus was thinking as He's knowing what He's about to endure? They're about to beat Him. They're about to insult Him. They're about to ridicule Him and put the crown of thorns on His head. They're going to blaspheme Him and God. And they're going to mock Him as they are torturously treating Him. What do you think He was preparing His mind for? I think He knew why He was going to do what He was going to do. I think that would be very powerful for you and I to think, why am I a Christian? Why am I going to do what I'm going to do? Why do I know that the sins he's naming in verse 3 are not right for me anymore? Well, let's break this down a little bit and help with that. The time past of our life, we wrought the will of the Gentiles when we walked in lasciviousness. What's that? Well, sensual passions. It's defined as indecent bodily movements, things that excite sexual passion, unchaste handling of males and females, anything that excites lust, really, basically. That's well, what is the world after? That. Drinking. And idolatry. He mentions 3 forms of drinking, really. I wonder why he names 3. Basically, it covers all the bases. Excessive wine, revelings, banquetings. Really, I encourage you to do your own homework. Look up these words and see what the definitions of those words are. I encourage you to do that. And what you find is they're all covered. Getting drunk is things, those are things the world does. Getting intoxicated. Going to parties where these things take place. And then the social drinking is also included. If you'll look that up in the banquetings. Really, it's all covered. But these are things the world does. They think this is how you have a good time. Well, really? How did that work out? I am standing before you as someone who has seen both sides of this coin right here. I'm standing before you as one who was raised in a household where parents drank, compared to when God got a hold of them and they repented and they decided they're not going to live the rest of their time like that. Now being raised in that home, night and day different. Night and day different. And I am forever thankful that my parents got this lesson while I was still young. I am standing before you as someone who I believe is so tremendously blessed. My life got infinitely better because my parents decided to stop living the way they were living. I am so thankful to be raised in a home where that was put away. And where love was exhibited. And where good things took place after the drinking was long gone. And I can tell you that when people try to sell this idea that drinking provides fun and recreation, I can tell you that is such a lie. Such a lie. Now, what I can tell you is, you name just about any crime, and why is it that almost always drinking is involved? You name almost any domestic violence case, why is there almost always drinking involved? You name almost any fight, and there's almost always drinking involved. Law enforcement people know this. I hope our brethren know this. Sometimes there are excuses made. But isn't this a really good argument that he's making? We've done enough of that. What are we going to do with the rest of our time? Stop living till Friday to get drunk on the weekends. That is not a good way to live. I can tell you life is a whole lot better sober. I can tell you that life is so much better when you're not putting anything in your body or in your mind that affects the way that you think, that causes you to be foggy, to not be able to drive safely. I know there are people who will make all kinds of sort of excuses for the things they do. And they'll say, oh, just a little bit, it's okay. I know there are people who do that. But then when you look at people who are addicted, and you look at people whose lives is ruined and their jobs are at stake, and the families are in shambles because of the problems that happen from the things that he mentions in verse 3. I think his argument about we've done enough of that is a really good argument. You can talk all day long, like if you want to, about how much is acceptable. But I think a Christian should just say, you know what? I want to please God. I want to live for Him. I've done enough of this living for the world, and the way the world does hasn't served me. And if you are a young person or an old person who has never tried any of these things, drugs or alcohol, you're in a great spot. But you're also at a crucial spot. And I want to encourage you, just don't start it. Because I have helped or tried to help people who want to break free, and now they've got a hard situation to try to break free from it. It's much easier. I am convinced, much easier to never try it the first time than to get addicted and then now try it. You want to be free, but it's got a hold of you. There is help. My parents did. Numerous other people have broken free. It's not an easy thing. It can be done. I do believe, because he's writing to people who says, we've done enough of that in our past life. Arm yourself. First off, embrace the idea you've done enough of that already. You're going to stop. Believe you're going to be able to quit. That's crucial. You got to want it. People who don't want it and they don't want to quit, I can't make a person quit these kinds of things. I've tried. It does not work. You cannot make someone stop these activities. But if the person themselves wants to quit and wants to quit bad enough, and they can believe that they can cease these activities, I liked the end of verse 1. He that has suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin. It's not saying you're going to be perfect. It's not saying you won't ever have a struggle or a stumble. But you need to be determined, I ain't living like this anymore. I ain't living like this. I ain't like that anymore. I've ceased. You know, it helps you to cease from sin when you realize that you've suffered a little bit of persecution for doing what is right and not for what is wrong. But then accept that not everybody, your friends are not going to be the same. Verse 4, wherein they think it strange. You need to accept that if you've been involved in the drinking, now your friends want to go out to drink and you don't want to participate, you ain't the same now. They're going to think it's strange that you don't run with them. And what are they going to do? They might speak evil of you. The end of verse 4. That's okay. Embrace that idea. And second off, just don't run with them. Don't go. They ask you to go to a party and there's going to be these kinds of activities, don't go. If you go and you didn't know that was going to happen and then it starts happening, leave. Embrace that idea. Bad things happen when these activities take place. All sorts of sins, people have died because somebody went to a party, somebody had too much, somebody got in a car, and now somebody's bereaved of a child or a husband or a parent. On and on the story goes. Had a high school classmate who was at a party. He's doing a little acid. His dad knew. His dad said, "Brad, please come home." Pulled out on the highway. Wrong side of the highway. Flipped the Jeep. Closed casket funeral. So much promise. Straight A student. Full ride. Scholarship. So likable. So young. So full of life. The people who knew him will never be the same. Don't run with them. Much better to not go. But if they speak evil of you, arm yourself with a mindset that you're okay with that. Verse 5, be reminded, who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead? Look, God's going to judge all of us. If somebody makes fun of you or ridicules you because you're not participating in their activities, let God deal with them. They will be judged. And He's going to judge you and me too. If you've been involved in any of these things and you want to break free, let us help you. Let us pray with you. Let us encourage you. If you are a Christian and you're still involved in some of these activities, what are you thinking? You should not be living the rest of your time like you once did. There should be a change in the way that you live. Seek the help that you need. If you haven't ever participated, don't ever start. That's the best advice I can give you. Start your life to please God whatever time you have left. You don't know how much the rest of your time is, but let's just decide. Whatever time the Lord blesses me with, I want Him to look at me and I want Him to be pleased. Would you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God? Would you be willing to say that to other people? Would you be willing to turn your life around? Start today. Take that first step to decide, I want to do my best to live for Him. Seek the forgiveness that He offers. He can wash away all those sins as if they've never been committed. And if you've been involved in these things to the point that it caused all kinds of other things and you're wondering, will God forgive me? Yes, absolutely. God forgives. Do you need to wait until you are perfect at all of these things? Absolutely not. You just need to decide, I want to do the very best I can. You can come to the front row. We'll be glad to assist you. Whatever